Okay, so today we have our meeting number 23, and we are already on the third canto. Today, chapter 12. And first topic for today is Brahma populates the universe. So, in the previous part, we studied the detailed description of the universal time that Maitreya gives on chapter 3.11, right? And now, after describing the effects of Kala, time, Maitreya continues his description, narrating the creation of Brahma in more detail. So there is a verse here, quote, first verse of the 12th chapter. Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. Jai. So we studied about time. Now we will study about the creation of Brahma in itself. So it's mentioned that Brahma started the creation by creating illusory engagements such as self-deception, the sense of death, anger of being frustrated, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory conception of life, like that makes a person forgets his original identity as a soul. And it's easy to understand why such influences they were created first, because they constitute the basis of conditioned life in this material world, right? If one does not identify with the body and believes that he possesses things in this world, like this is mine, this is I, so without this, what is the possibility of remaining conditioned here in the material world, right? So these are influences that affect all conditioned living beings. And it's not possible for one to remain here in this material world without these things. So Brahma creates this first. So Prabhupada mentions in his purport that before the factual creation of the living entities in different varieties of species, the conditions under which a living being in the material world has to live were created by Brahma. Unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it's impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. Therefore, the first condition of material existence is forgetfulness of one's real identity. And by forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death, although a pure living soul is deathless and birthless. So, fear of death comes from identification with the body, right? If I think I'm the body, then of course I will fear death because one day the body will die, right? It's not possible to avoid it. And then we have the next topic, the creation of the four Kumaras. So, although necessary for the working of the universe, right? Lord Brahma was not very pleased with these activities of creation, right? Creating so many illusory engagements. Therefore, he decided to purify himself by meditating on Lord Vishnu before starting another term of creation, right? So before continuing, he wanted to purify himself. So with such an elevated mentality, he engaged himself in the creation of the four Kumaras, who were almost completely pure. So this is described on verse 5. So, quote, Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they aimed at liberation, and therefore they expressed their unwillingness, right? So Brahma hoped that the Kumaras, they would create progeny and help him to fill up the universe. But being so pure, the Kumaras, they were transcendentalists who were not interested in such work. So they didn't even want to grow up. What you say about, getting married and producing children. So they preferred to stay as small children, right? Avoiding thus the possibility of falling under sexual urges. So it is described that the four Kumaras, they were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semen flowing upwards, right? That's the words that are using. The semen was flowing upwards. So what does it mean? So in Ayurveda, semen is described as the quintessence of food, right? The last transformation of the nutrients absorbed by the body and the giver of life. So if one preserves his semen, he can greatly increase his vitality, intelligence, duration of life, and so on, right? This is explained in the Ayurveda. So this is particularly useful for one interested in advanced study of the Vedas and renounced life, like in the case of the Kumaras, right? So to avoid the possibility of becoming later involved in sexual activities, the Kumaras, they used their yogic power to remain as small children, right? So they didn't even wanted to grow up, right? What to say about uh, getting married and producing children. So Prabhupada explains this point later in the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.126. So he says, quote, the words Urdhva Retasa in this verse is very significant. Urdhva Retaha refers to one who can control sex life and who, instead of wasting semen by discharging it, can use this most important substance accumulated in the body to enrich the brain. One who can completely control sex life is able to work wonderfully with his brain, especially in remembering. Thus, students who simply hear Vedic instructions once from their teacher could remember them verbatim, without needing to read books, which therefore did not exist in former times. Right? Interesting, right? So, because the four Kumaras, they were so spiritually elevated, Brahma entrusted them the four principles of knowledge that compose the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas, right? That is Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Bhakti Kanda. Jnana Kanda went to the Kumaras, Karma Kanda to Daksha, and the other eight sons, and Bhakti Kanda to Narada Muni. So, okay, so what are these four principles of knowledge that compose Jnana Kanda? So the first is Sankhya. So Sankhya is the analytical study of the material world to become free from it, right? So this philosophy, it will be explained in detail by Lord Kapila later in the third canto. And then number two is yoga, the path of mysticism to attain liberation, right, from the material world. And yoga is a generic word that can be applied to any process that help us to connect with Krishna. But here the word yoga applies to the process of mystic yoga, right? Specifically. Then number three is vairagya, right? Vairagya is the process of detachment from materialistic life to attain spiritual understanding. Then four is tapas, right? And tapas means the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed to attain spiritual perfection, right? So these are the four principles of the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas. So, who are the four Kumaras? The four Kumaras, they preside over the planetary system of Tapaloka, which is immediately under Satyaloka. And Satyaloka, of course, is the planet of Brahma. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it is described that this planet, this planetary system, is inhabited only by great sages who are promoted there after being perfect brahmacharis for many lives. So they are fully renounced and they spend most of their time in samadhi, right, in meditation, seeing Paramatma inside their hearts. So they rarely talk, and when they do talk of something, it is exclusively to do some philosophical discussion. So there is absolutely no Prajalpa in Tapaloka. So if you don't like Prajalpa, that's a good place for you. So the Kumaras, they disseminate this knowledge that they received from Brahma all over the universe, right? Everywhere they speak about meditation, about Sankhya, and so on. So later, in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described how they instructed King Prithu, for example. And they are also founders of the Kumara Sampradaya, right, which is one of the four Vaishnava disciplic successions. And it's also interesting to note that although Sarasvati Devi, like the goddess of learning, is generally considered the consort of Lord Brahma, their relationship is not sexual at all. Sarasvati Devi is more like the energy of Lord Brahma, connected with the understanding of Vedic knowledge. So she's like the intelligence of Lord Brahma, we may say. So she helps him to understand Krishna, just like she helps other souls in the material universes to understand Vedic knowledge. So we have information that in the spiritual world there are also couples, like just like here, but their relationships, they are centered on their devotional service, right? So this part is different from here. So in other words, in the spiritual world, the focus of the relationship is the service to Krishna and not just, mutual satisfaction here in the material world. So although, anatomically complete, like nothing is missing in their bodies, they consider, sexual relationships very distasteful and they don't engage in it. So so this cooperation between Brahma and Sarasvati Devi is a good example of how relationships they can be purified, even while we are still living inside this material universe. So it's quite an interesting point. Also, Lord Brahma, he performs his service of creation by just meditating in the forms that he desires to create. But of course, this is only for Lord Brahma. Like other beings in the universe, they create progeny through the sexual act. So Brahma desired that his sons, the four Kumaras, they would get married and help him, right, in his service of populating the universe. But when they refused, Brahma became angry. And from between his eyebrows came Lord Shiva in the form of a child of mixed blue and red wool, right? So there is a verse describing this. This is 5 and 6. So, quote, Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are aimed at liberation and therefore they express their unwillingness. On the refusal of the sons to obey the order of the father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. And now we come to the next points. The appearance of Lord Shiva and how the universe was almost destroyed, right? Very nice time to destroy the universe when it's still being created, right? So almost the universe ended before it was created. It was very dangerous times. So, Lord Shiva, he is originally the look, the glance of Mahavishnu, who carries all the souls who will take part of the material creation as well as the time energy. So he inseminates the material nature and initiates the process of creation of the material universes. So this original form of Lord Shiva, Sada Shiva, is considered an expansion of Lord Vishnu. Like he's Vishnu Tattva. It's just like he's an expansion of Lord Vishnu. Uh, so Lord Sadashiva, he lives eternally on his planet called Sadashiva Loka, situated on the spiritual side, close to the border between the Brahmajyoti and the causal ocean. And so this is a spiritual planet. It's not a material planet. It's on the spiritual side. And there, Lord Sadashiva, he eternally performs kirtan, surrounded by his associates. And his eternal consort is Ramadevi, who is an expansion of Lakshmi, right? So in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it's narrated how Gopakumara went there. He visited this planet after passing through the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. So this original Lord Shiva, he incarnates as the innumerable forms of Lord Shiva present in all the different material universes. So in this form, he associates with the material energy, right, which is the shadow of Ramadevi, and thus part of his transcendental qualities are covered. So when he becomes like when he associates with the material energy, he becomes Shiva Tattva instead of Vishnu Tattva. And then he exhibits only 84% of Krishna's qualities. So to explain this, the example of milk and yogurt is given, like, because when milk is combined with an acid, it becomes curd. And curd is not nothing more than milk, right? It's just a transformation of milk, but its properties change, right? So curd or yogurt, these are transformations of milk, but they don't have the same properties, right? And it can be used in the place of milk in recipes, right? If you try to make, sweet rice with curd, it's going to become very funny, right? It doesn't work. It's a different product, right? Although it comes from milk. So when it's mentioned that Lord Brahma created Lord Shiva from his anger, this means that from this pastime, the particular incarnation of Lord Shiva for this universe appeared. So it's important thus to understand that Lord Shiva is an indirect expansion of the Lord and not a separate God. Still, he comes from Krishna and he's dependent on Krishna. He's not separated. He's not independent. As we studied previously, the 18 Puranas, they are divided in three groups, right? So there is 6 Puranas for people influenced by goodness, then 6 for people under passion, and 6 for people under ignorance. So some verses of the Tamasic Puranas, they appear to indicate Lord Shiva as the Supreme Lord, but this is done just to increase the faith of his followers. In reality, names mentioned in such verses, such as Shiva and Rudra, are actually mentioned there as being names of Lord Vishnu, not names of the demigod Shiva. So, in other words, these verses that appear to describe Shiva as the Supreme, they don't describe Lord Shiva at all. They speak about Lord Vishnu, right? So Shiva, Rudra, and names like that in these verses, they are used as names of Lord Vishnu, not as names of Lord Shiva. That's interesting. So it is described that Brahma tried to control his anger, right? And he was able to control it to a certain extent, like not showing it externally. But still, he was disturbed inside. And this was sufficient to lead to the creation of Lord Shiva. So one could question how Brahma, right, becoming so elevated, he could become angry, right? Well, how is that, right? So Prabhupada explains that because Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion, right, of material nature, it is actually natural for him to become angry when his sons refused to obey his order. So his anger is actually not unjustified because he wanted the Kumaras to beget children to help him in his devotional service of, creating the universe. So it was not a personal thing. He became angry because the Kumaras didn't want to cooperate with his devotional service. The Kumaras, on the other hand, also refused based on a higher purpose because they wanted to remain pure and instruct others in devotional service. So this shows that sometimes even very advanced devotees, they can disagree due to differences in their preferences in performing their service. But because in these cases the disagreements are centered in their service, in the service to the Lord, it's not outside the sphere of devotional service. So it's not material anger, it's not Maya. It's like spiritual anger, we can say. And then, so Lord Shiva, he performs many roles inside the universe, right? And thus he receives many names such as Manu, Mahinasa, Mahan, Shiva, Ritadwaja, Ugrareta, Bhava, Kala, Vamadeva, Dritavrata. And the particular form of Lord Shiva who appeared from the anger of Brahma is Rudra, right? The personification of anger. So in this form, Shiva has 11 wives. They are called Rudranis, and they are all manifestations of the material energy. So they are all manifestations of the original wife. So they also were, and these Rudranis, they were also manifested from Brahma as his daughters. And in this way, at the beginning of the creation, Brahma created both sons and daughters out of his mind, and he tried to arrange, their marriages so they could further populate the universe. And of course, in your planet, right, marriage between brothers and sisters is condemned, for several reasons, like including the fact that, similarities in the DNA leads to miscarriages and birth defects and so on. There's so many problems. But such factors, they don't apply to higher beings like the descendants of Brahma because they don't have gross bodies like us. And also they don't go through a process of growth like us. They just like appear. So in case of such elevated personalities, this type of marriage is not condemned, right? So this explains this point. So back to the pastime. The anger that is personified in Lord Rudra manifests in all conditioned living beings, like in the course of their activities, right? Who never became angry, can throw the first stone, right? So Srila Prabhupada, he explains how this works in his purport. This is purport for verse 11. So, quote, the creation of Rudra from between the eyebrows of Brahma as the result of his anger, generated from the mode of passion, partially touched by ignorance, is very significant. In Bhagavad Gita 3:37, the principle of Rudra is described. Krodha, anger, is a product of kama, lust, which is the result of the mode of passion. When lust and hankering are unsatisfied, the element of Krodha appears, which is the formidable enemy of the conditioned soul. This most sinful and inimical passion is represented as ahankara, or the false egocentric attitude of thinking oneself to be all in all. Such an egocentric attitude on the part of the conditioned soul, who is completely under the control of material nature, is described in the Bhagavad Gita as foolish. The egocentric attitude is a manifestation of the Rudra principle in the heart, wherein Krodha, anger, is generated. This anger develops in the heart and is further manifested through various senses, like the eyes, hands, and legs, right? So this is the explanation of Prabhupada. So Brahma asked Lord Shiva, Rudra, to generate population in cooperation with his wives. But, as Rudra, Lord Shiva started generating a great number of sons who were very angry in nature. And they, in turn, generated more offspring like of the same quality, right? Very, very angry, resulting in a huge population that started destroying the newly created universe, right? So the 11 principal Rudras, they are expansions of Lord Shiva, while others, they are ordinary living entities who are empowered by him. So their function is to assist him in destroying the universe. But in this case, right, it was out of place, right? The destruction started when the universe was just beginning, right? It started before the universe was even created. So this is described on verses 16 and 17. Quote, the sons and grandsons generated by Rudra were unlimited in number, and when they assemble together, they attempt to devour the entire universe. When Brahma, the father of the living entities, saw this, he became afraid of the situation. Brahma told Rudra, "O best among the demigods, there is no need for you to generate living entities of this nature. They have begun to devastate everything on all sides with the fiery flames from their eyes, and they have even attacked me." Right? So imagine the calamity, right? So alarmed. So this is the quote, right? So Brahma became very alarmed. So he asked Lord Shiva to stop, generating this type of offspring and instead engage himself in penance for the auspiciousness of all beings. So he received this mission. So in this way, Lord Shiva, followed by all his sons, right, the Rudras and so on, he went to his abode and fixed himself in the practice of devotional service of the Lord, right, giving us example as the greatest Vaishnava, right? Vaishnavam Yata Sambhu. So Lord Shiva, he remains in this peaceful state, a benevolent state, we can say, until the end of creation. And then when the time comes, then he again assumes this angry nature and he destroys the universe in collaboration with Lord Ananta and the Rudras, right? Then when it's the proper time, then he again destroys. So just like material energy is considered the mother of all living beings, Lord Shiva is considered the father. So as the father of the universe, he constantly meditates in ways to help all living entities to gradually advance spiritually and eventually go back to Godhead. And we can see that throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Shiva appears to help and giving blessings to both devotees and demons, right? He's like impartial in this sense. So the nature of Lord Shiva is explained by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura on his commentary on the Brahma Samhita 545. So I'm just making the points here that he mentions there. If you want to see the whole purport, you can check there, 545. So in this purport, he mentions that, one, since Lord Shiva, Lord Sadashiva, right, is an expansion of Krishna, they are not really different from each other, right, when we speak about Sadashiva. However, Sadashiva is dependent on Krishna, right? So he's not independent. And then, two, the difference between them is compared to the difference between milk and yogurt. Then C, Shiva is empowered with the destructive power of time, and thus he is empowered to destroy the universe. And then four, Lord Shiva also plays the role of the greatest Vaishnava by teaching Dharma in the form of different types of pious duties that serve as stepping stones to the attainment of devotional service. So in this way, he helps jivas in different stages of consciousness. And apart from manifesting the 50 qualities of conditioned souls, like in much great quantity, Lord Shiva, he manifests 5 qualities that ordinary souls don't have. So in this way, Lord Shiva is a category apart, right? He's Shiva Tattva, different from ordinary souls. Haribo. So, okay, so this is the creation of Lord Shiva. Then next part is that Brahma creates 10 great sons. Jai, right? So after his pastime of generating Lord Shiva, Brahma continued his work of creation, right? He creating 10 great sons. So these are Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Brigu, Vasista, Daksha, and Narada, right? Jaya. So the first 9 of these sons, right, except Narada, and they were led by Daksha. And they were mostly inclined to perform fruitive activities. So Brahma entrusted them with the knowledge of the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, and he engaged them in performing sacrifices. And this part is described in the second canto, 2.6.28 and 2.6.29. We studied this in the past. So, quote, "Thus I created the ingredients and paraphernalia for offering sacrifice out of the parts of the body of the Supreme Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice. And I performed the sacrifice to satisfy the Lord. My dear son, Thereafter, your 9 brothers, who are the masters of living creatures, performed the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. So you see, this sacrifice described on second canto, it happened in this part, right, when Brahma created these 9 sons. So later, after performing sacrifices, Brahma got these sons married to the daughters and granddaughters of Swayambhuva Manu, and he engaged them in populating the universe. So almost all living beings who exist, like both humans and animals, they are descendants of these 9 sons, especially Daksha, who is the main progenitor of the universe. So these 10 sons are the original Prajapatis who give birth to the first human beings and demigods, as well as other Prajapatis who populate the universe, Manvantara after Manvantara, right? So these are the original progenitors of the universe, these 9 sons. So the great Kashyapa Muni, for example, who is described later as the uh, husband of Aditi, right? And Diti also, like the mothers of the demigods and the demons, right? In the 6th Manvantara, is the son of Marichi, for example. And similarly, all the great personalities mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, they can have their ancestry traced back to the sons of Brahma, as well as Swayambhuva Manu, Kashyapa, and other sons who were generated later, right? So these are really the progenitors of everyone who comes after. So each of these 9 sons, they were born from a part of the body of Brahma. Narada, however, was born from Lord Brahma's transcendental deliberation, right? So from his like spiritual knowledge. So Narada is thus the best of the sons of Brahma because of his natural devotional attitude. And because of this, he was entrusted with the Bhakti Kanda, right? The knowledge about devotional service to the Lord. And he distributes this knowledge throughout the universe. So Nara means the Supreme Lord, and Da means one who can deliver, one who gives. So the appearance of Narada Muni as the son of Brahma is a continuation of the events narrated in the first canto, right? We studied that Narada was born in his previous life as the son of the maid servant, and he had opportunity of associating with great sages, right, and so on. And these events, they happened in the previous day of Brahma, right? So after attaining spiritual realization, he appeared as the son of Brahma in the current day. So Narada is a Nitya Siddha, right? An eternally liberated soul. However, at the same time, he performed his pastime of taking birth in the material world and playing the role of a conditioned soul, and then meeting devotees, attaining self-realization, and so on. And this is also the case with other great devotees like Prahlada Maharaja, Dhruva Maharaja, right? They continuously appear in different universes to perform their pastimes and to guide the conditioned souls and help them, right, to rediscover their lost relationship with Krishna. So, although Narada Muni, just like the Kumaras, he doesn't engage in generating population. Lord Brahma, he is never dissatisfied with him because he performs the most important service, right? Helping the inhabitants of the universe going back to Godhead, right? So that's the ultimate purpose of the universe. So that's the contribution that Narada Muni gives. Others, they can generate children, right? Narada Muni, he has a more important job to do. So the talks between Brahma and Narada Muni that are described in the second canto, they happened at this stage when the universe had just been created, and Narada Muni started inquiring about the purpose of creation and other philosophical topics, right? So we can situate, we can connect, right, these two descriptions in this way. Right? So Brahma creates Narada Muni, and these talks that we have between Brahma and Narada Muni that we have in the second canto, chronologically, they happened after that. And then here, Brahma continues the process of creation, right? Jai. So after generating these 10 sons, these 10 great sons, Brahma, he continued his process of creation by generating religion and irreligion, lust and desire, anger, greed, the power of speaking, and so on, right? So he continued his work of creation. And now these were created again from different parts of his body. And we can see that just like the senses and other components of the universe, these are energies that were created before by Lord Mahavishnu in the process of primary creation, right? And this is described in the second canto, right? 10th chapter of the second canto. So at this stage, right, like in the primary creation, the Lord creates the material form, the Lord creates the universal form, right? The Virat Rupa. And this contains all the different senses, objects of the senses, material potencies, etc., together with their predominating deities, right? So this Virat Rupa manifests inside each universe and serves as a foundation for the creation of Brahma. So when it is described that Brahma created anger, for example, it means that he created the manifestation of anger, right, together with its predominating deity for this particular universe. While at the previous stage, the Lord created the blueprint of anger for all the universe, right? So the Lord created like the project, and now Brahma, he is creating, the physical manifestation, we can say, for this particular universe, and other Brahmas, they do for their own universes, right? So one way to understand this is that there is one original Lord Shiva, right, Sadashiva, who presides over all material creation. And by the way, he comes also from Mahavishnu. And there is one Lord Shiva inside each universe, right? So the original Shiva appears from Lord Mahavishnu, while the numerous Shivas in each universe, they are expansions of this original Shiva that appear to be created by Brahma. So interesting, right? So this is one example that can help us to understand that. So there is a quote here, verses 25 and 26. Quote, religion was manifested from the breast of Brahma, wherein is seated the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and irreligion appeared from his back, where horrible death takes place for the living entity. Lust and desire became manifested from the heart of Brahma, anger from between his eyebrows, greed from between his lips, the power of speaking from his mouth, the ocean from his penis, and low and abominable activities from his anus, the source of all sins. Unquote. So, okay, so continue. Brahma also created Kardama Muni from his shadow, right? So Kardama Muni is a great sage who also received from Brahma the mission of helping him to populate the universe, right? Haribo. So this is actually a difficulty that is present in all ages, including at the current time, right? Because although all kinds of living beings, they produce descendants, like horses, dogs, and also low-class people, like they produce children like rabbits, right? But elevated human beings and great sages, like capable of understanding God, they are rare in the creation, right? So this is the problem. The problem is not exactly generating offspring, but generating like saintly children, like spiritually inclined offspring. So because so these great sages and pure devotees, they are rare because they can be generated only from elevated fathers and mothers, right? So such the elevated devotees, they are not common. And many are not inclined to generate descendants like the four Kumaras, for example. Therefore, there is always a lack of qualified couples all over the universe, in all ages, capable of generating and educating like elevated children who can guide others back to Godhead. And so this is a great problem all the time. So with this in mind, Kardama Muni, he meditated for a very long period to purify himself and obtain the blessings of the Supreme Lord. And soon afterward, Kardama married Devahuti, and apart from 9 very qualified daughters, they begot Lord Kapila, who benefited the whole world by explaining, right, the theistic philosophy of Sankhya. There is the atheistic Sankhya that was explained by the fake Kapila, by the impostor Kapila, and there is the theistic Sankhya that was explained by Lord Kapila. That's what we studied in the Bhagavatam. So Kardama Muni, he is the perfect example of family life in Krishna consciousness. And his story is narrated in detail later in the 3rd canto. In a few weeks, we will study his story. And then Brahma becomes attracted to his daughter and abandons his body. So Brahma created also a daughter called Vaki. This Vak is not Vaki, Vak. So Brahma created this daughter, Vak, and she's the predominating deity of speech. So somehow Brahma became attracted and he started following her. And this led Marichi and his other sons to voice their condemnation, right? So these are verses 30 and 31. Quote, "Oh, Father, this performance in which you are endeavoring to complicate yourself was never attempted by any other Brahma, nor by anyone else, nor by you in the previous kalpas, nor will anyone dare to attempt it in the future. Even though you are the most powerful being, this act does not suit you, because your character is followed for spiritual improvement by people in general." Right? So they chastised Brahma, right? So it's difficult to understand, how a great personality like Brahma, who doesn't even have a gross body like ours, could be inclined in such a way, even though he just contemplated it in his mind, like he didn't really do anything, but he had the desire. But Prabhupada, he offers a possible explanation for this in one of his purports. So, quote, Prabhupada says, "It might be that Brahma wanted to warn his subordinates about human frailties in their dealings with women. This is always very dangerous for persons who are in the path of self-realization. Therefore, great personalities like Brahma, even when in the wrong, should not be neglected. Nor could the great sages headed by Marichi show any disrespect because of his extraordinary behavior." Right? Unquote. So, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Srila Sanatana Goswami, he mentions that often great personalities, they commit mistakes to call our attention to mistakes that we can also commit and their results, right? To teach us. So Brahma becoming attracted to his daughter, and so Brahma becoming attracted to his daughter led him to be chastised, like by his sons, right? Condemned by his sons. Bharata Maharaja becoming attached to the deer led him to take 2 additional births before going back to Godhead, and so on, right? There are so many cases. So Sanatana Goswami, he explains that such examples are not due to their, falling Maya, but actually a play that is performed for our benefit. So it is described that after seeing the reaction of his sons, Brahma understood his mistake and he became ashamed. So he then abandoned the body that he was using, and this body became the darkness of ignorance that covers the whole universe, right? So from this illusion of Brahma came this darkness for everyone that covers the material universe. And so this darkness affects everyone, and the only antidote is to take shelter in the Supreme Lord, right? Haribo. And there is a quote here, 33. "So the father of all Prajapatis, Brahma, thus seeing all his Prajapati sons speaking that way, became very much ashamed, and at once gave up the body he had accepted. Later, that body appeared in all directions as the dangerous fog in darkness." And then Prabhupada explains in his purport that The best way to compensate for one's sinful acts is to give up one's body at once. And Brahma, the leader of the living entities, showed this by his personal example. Brahma has a fabulous duration of life, but he was obliged to give up his body due to his grievous sin, even though he had merely contemplated it in his mind without having actually done it. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, or sinful life is the cause of gross ignorance. The feature of ignorance is darkness or fog. Darkness or fog still covers the whole universe, and the sun is the only counteracting principle. One who takes shelter of the Lord, the perpetual light, has no fear of being annihilated in the darkness of fog or ignorance. So one can question how Brahma could, unquote, like, so now it's me speaking. So one can question how Brahma could leave his body, right? Like it's understood that Brahma didn't just, drop dead. Otherwise, it would be the end of the universe. So what exactly does this change of body means? And this is connected with something that we studied in the beginning of the second canto. Maybe you'll remember this verse. This is 2:28. So, quote, after reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly in the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body, and one after another, he gradually attains the stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, airy, until he reaches the ethereal stage. So the important part here is that the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body. So, what does it mean? So different grades of gross bodies are used by inhabitants of the intermediate planetary systems, right? So in Kali Yuga, for example, our bodies are of the grossest type. So other inhabitants of Bhumandala, they have different grades of more refined bodies. The inhabitants of Swargaloka, they also have bodies composed of 5 elements, but their bodies are very refined. It's some kind of very refined version of these elements. And then, as one goes up, from Maharloka to Janaloka and then to Tapaloka, the bodies become more and more refined, to the point that there are practically no more vestiges of material elements. And then when one comes to Satyaloka, there is no more material elements at all. They use only their subtle bodies, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. So the subtle bodies, however, they assume a form similar to a gross body. Right? So it's not a gross body, but it works like a gross body, allowing them to perform activities, to do their sacrifices, and so on. And that's how the inhabitants of these high planetary systems, they can have such fabulous durations of life, right? Surviving the devastation at the end of the day of Brahma and living for like literally trillions of years, right? So this gives us an idea of the type of body that Brahma has. So his body is simply formed by his consciousness, without traces of material elements. So his consciousness assumes a certain form, right, according to what activities he's performing. And when the consciousness moves into something else, then his form is abandoned and a new form is manifested. So this process happens numerous times during the process of creation. So Brahma abandoning his body means he abandoned this like sinful consciousness of chasing his daughter. And then we have the creation of the Vedas. So at a certain point, as he meditated on how to, recreate the universe as it was before, the 4 Vedas emanated from the mouths of Brahma, right? 1 Veda from each mouth. And with the Vedas, different of types of paraphernalia for executing sacrifices, as well as truth, austerity, mercy, cleanness, no, the four principles of religiosity, and also the duties for the four social classes, right? Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. All of these, they were generated. So the four Vedas, they were followed by all the other groups of knowledge that are part of the Vedic culture, such as medicine, military science, musical art, architecture, and so on. So all the different branches of knowledge, they actually derive from knowledge from the Vedas. So the word Veda in itself means knowledge, right? So all knowledge that exists, it comes originally from Lord Mahavishnu, and it is transmitted to different inhabitants of this universe through the disciplic succession, starting from Lord Brahma. So these different branches of knowledge, they become available or unavailable in human society at different times, right? As the knowledge is revealed by great personalities and later gradually forgotten. So in his purport to 312:38, Prabhupada mentions, like a quote, the Vedas contain perfect knowledge, which includes all kinds of knowledge necessary for the human society, and not only on this particular planet, but on other planets as well. It is understood that military art is also necessary knowledge for the upkeep of social order, as is the art of music. All these different groups of knowledge are called the Upapurana, or supplements of the Vedas. Spiritual knowledge is the main topic of the Vedas, but to help the human beings' spiritual pursuit of knowledge, the other information, as above mentioned, forms necessary branches of the Vedic knowledge. Unquote. So the Vedas include all types of knowledge, right? Because everything that exists was originally created by Lord Mahavishnu as part of the primary creation, right? There is no thought or object or activity that exists that was not created by Mahavishnu at that point, right? So different living beings just receive this knowledge from inside the heart or rediscover things that were already created by the Lord in the past by some process of experimentation, right? So, sometimes they get it through the Vedas, sometimes the Lord just gives from the heart. So one may create a plane, for example, but such a creation is only possible because the Lord conceived the same plane in the past, right? Just as everything else that exists or will exist in the future, right? So actually, no, the engineer is not inventing the plane. The Lord is just revealing to him from the heart how to make this plane that he himself created in the past. So all technological and artistic knowledge that we have nowadays is also originally part of the Vedas. It is just that instead of receiving this knowledge through disciplic succession, in modern society, we try to obtain it through different processes of experimentation. So in this way, all we do is to just, slowly rediscover bits of knowledge that were originally part of the Vedas, right? And this is just like a much slower and more difficult process. So on Srimad Bhagavatam 2.7.34, for example, it's mentioned how in a different Kali Yuga, human beings, they were able to receive like advanced Vedic, technical knowledge from Maya Danava. And in this way, they built very advanced, invisible spacecrafts on which they were able to invade other planets. And this led to one of the appearances of Lord Buddha, right, who came to teach them nonviolence. So this shows how Vedic knowledge includes all branches of knowledge, right, including this advanced technical knowledge that we don't have access, at current times. Like we don't know how to create, spaceships that can go to other planets, right? Like they were able to do in this other Kali Yuga using this advanced Vedic knowledge. So on Srimad Bhagavatam 3.12.39, it's mentioned that Brahma also created the itihasas. And this includes the Puranas and the Mahabharata. And then one could question how this can be possible, because these books, they speak about events that happened, like this story, this pastime, it speaks about events that happened in the beginning of of Brahma's day, right? Billions of years ago. And books like Mahabharata, they speak about events that happened much later, right? Bhagavatam, for example, speaks about things that happened after that. So answering this question, the verse includes the words Sarva Darshana. And this indicates that Lord Brahma can see past, present, and future. And in this way, he can speak about events that will happen in the future, just like we may discuss events that are happening now. So to Brahma, this, past and present and future, it's all known. He knows everything. Therefore, he can speak about things that will happen in the future, like it's present, right? So we can see that in the 7th chapter of the 2nd canto, at the beginning of his current day, Lord Brahma, he gives Narada Muni a list of the incarnations of Krishna that appeared only later on, including Krishna appearing in Vrindavan like 5,000 years ago and so on. So this shows how great personalities like Brahma, they just have a different view of time, right? Although they go through their lives, just like we do, all the events that are about to happen, they are already known to them. They know already. So, however, being detached, they understand, the power of providence, and they don't try to change what is going to happen, right? They just continue. Right? So, yeah, they just live, right, according to providence. So it's described that later on, Brahma also created the duties for the 4 spiritual classes, right? Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. And this completed the revelation of the Varnashrama system, right? That is followed by all advanced societies around the universe. So in this connection, it's interesting to note that although nowadays we consider, like we are, like as a society, although we consider ourselves quite advanced, like we call modern society, modern age, and so on, civilized society, or current society, like in the like different societies in the world, they are not considered very advanced from the point of view of the inhabitants of other planets, right? In reality, during the age of Kali, our planet is avoided by advanced personalities from other planets. Like our planet is basically quarantined, right? That we are like that's our situation. We are quarantined. However, it was not always like that. So in previous ages, it was common for great sages and demigods and other advanced personalities to visit our planet, to attend ceremonies and transmit Vedic knowledge and so on, right? So this is kind of this quarantine is like a particularity of Kali Yuga. So after manifesting all these different material qualities and branch of knowledge, Brahma lamented that despite all this work, the population of the universe was still not increasing, right? So as he contemplated, 2 forms were generated from his body, one male and another female. The male was Swayambhuva Manu, the first of the sequence of the 14 Manus, and the female was Satarupa, like his wife. So this led to the start of the first Manvantara, right? Jaya. So now things will start to happen. So the creation of the first Manu. So there are 14 Manus in a day of Brahma, of which Swayambhuva Manu is the first, right? So Swayambhuva Manu is generated directly from Brahma. And the other Brahma and the other Manus, they appear as descendants of Swayambhuva Manu or the other sons of Brahma. So the reign of Swayambhuva Manu started closing to the beginning of the current day of Brahma, and that's 1.973 billion years ago, according to Puranic chronology. If we want to have this in terms of years in our planet, then we multiply per 2. Then it becomes 3.9 something billion years in like earthly years. So there are 2 ways of calculating the dates mentioned in the Vedas, right? So one is to just add numbers the way they are mentioned in the scriptures. And this results in what we can call Puranic dates, right? Dates according to time in Bhumandala, right? And based on that, we can use these dates, these Puranic dates, to understand the chronology of the different events that are mentioned in the scriptures according to the day of Brahma, the different Manvantaras, and so on, right? So we have these Puranic years that we just need to, add the dates that are mentioned in the scriptures. And then there is another way to calculate time, that is to calculate dates according to solar years on our planet. And this calculation is useful when we want to relate dates mentioned in the Puranas with dates mentioned in scientific studies, right? And for that, we need to take into consideration another point that is called the Sridhara Swami's factor of 2. So, for example, the date for the creation of the solar system, according to years of Bhumandala, like Puranic years, is 2.281 billion years ago, right? And and modern studies, they give 4.567 billion years, right? However, when we convert the Puranic dates, these 2.281 billion years, Puranic years, into solar years of our planet, then uh, then we get 4.562 billion years. And this is, extraordinarily close to modern studies. Like modern studies, they give 4.567. The Vedas, when multiply correctly, they give 4.562. So this is like 0.01% difference. So it's practically the same number. But the Vedas, they gave this number, since millions of years ago, right? Modern science is catching up. So similarly, we can calculate the date for the beginning of the universe. Like if we calculate in terms of Puranic years, we have 6.1995 billion years in terms of years in Bhumandala, right? And to calculate that, we start from the last day of Brahma, and then we add the night, we add the sanjas, and so on. Then we add what went off the current day, and so on. And then when we convert this number into years of our planet, then we come to 13 billion 819 billion years. And again, the scientific date, latest study, 2018, is 13 billion 801 billion years. And again, it's practically the same number. The difference is 0 something percent. It's like 0.15%, something like that. So it's interesting that it seems that after 2 centuries of studies, modern scientists, they are coming quite close to the correct dates of creation of the universe and the solar system and other things that are given in the Puranas, right? So as Prabhupada explains, experimental knowledge is also a way to obtain knowledge, right? Sometimes you can get it right, but it's a very slow and painful process, right? So you see, the scientists, they're studying for centuries to only now, recently, start coming to numbers that are close to the numbers that the Vedas give, right? So that's a point that Prabhupada makes, that if we just accept the knowledge from the Vedas from the beginning, we save a lot of time. So anyway, this is just an introduction. We will study this point about dates and so on in more detail later when we study Vedic cosmology. But anyway, back to Manu. When Brahma saw that despite several suns, there was not a great increase in population, he started considering how the population of the universe could increase, right? like how I can increase this population. So while he was thus, contemplating in his mind, then the first Manu and his wife, they were generated from his body. And then there is a quote here from verses 50 to 55. Quote, O son of the Kurus, right? This is Maitreya speaking to Vidura. So, O son of the Kurus, when Brahma saw that in spite of the presence of of sages of great potency, there was no sufficient increase in population, he seriously began to consider how the population could be increased. Brahma thought to himself, Alas, it is wonderful that in spite of me being scattered all over, there is still insufficient population throughout the universe. There is no other cause for this misfortune but destiny. While he was thus absorbed in contemplation, he was observing the supernatural power. Two other forms were generated from his body. They are still celebrated as the body of Brahma. The two nearly separated bodies united together in a sexual relationship. Out of them, the one who had the male form became known as Manu, named Swayambhuva, and the woman became known as Satarupa, the queen of the great soul Manu. Thereafter, by sex indulgence, they gradually increased generations of population one after another, right? Jai. So Swayambhuva Manu and Satarupa, they had 5 children, like 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. So Akuti was giving marriage to the sage Ruchi, which is another of the sons of Brahma, Devahuti to the sage Kardama, and Prasuti to Daksha. So these 3 couples, they had many daughters who were giving marriage to the other sons of Brahma and other sages. And then from these couples, the universe was gradually populated, right? Haribo, Jai. So, okay, so this is it for today. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So if there are any questions or comments, you can ask. Yes?
Thank you very much for your course. Can you please explain once again about Narada? I didn't understand how is it that his first birth was like a son of a maidservant and his next birth like a son of Brahma? I thought that they should be like change the places that first Brahma created the universe and Narada was born and then he was the son of the maidservant, but I think you said it was another way. Can you explain?
Yes, so Narada Muni was the son of the maidservant in the previous day of Brahma, right? And the previous day of Brahma was the last day of the first pararda, the first half of the life of Brahma. So after this day, when Narada Muni was the son of the maidservant, the whole universe was completely destroyed. Narada Muni himself describes that he entered the body of Mahavishnu together with all the great sages and so on. And then what Bhagavatam describes is the recreation of the universe in the beginning of the current day, right? Brahma comes from the lotus flower, everything is dark, and he creates the universe from zero, right? And then Narada Muni appears in his, eternal form as one of his sons. And then he preaches, devotional service.
Oh, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the previous day of Brahma, right?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glórias to Srila Prabhupada. Gaura Premanande. Haribol. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.